Who's watching you? Fans attending the Super Bowl had no idea they were in a lineup of sorts, under surveillance, tracked by electronic eyes in search of criminal faces.
There is no expectation of privacy in a crowd of 100,000 people.
It's not the only place Big Brother keeps his eye on you. Don't forget to smile the next time you drive through an intersection, walk down the street, through a bank, a restaurant, or a casino. Your face could be captured and possibly stored, all legal and done in the name of public safety.
It did identify 19 individuals. These individuals range from con artists to pickpockets.
But are you, the private citizen, becoming public property? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Talkback Live. Well, most of us aren't even aware of the cameras recording our lives. Maybe they don't bother you. Maybe they do. But if you're not a criminal, should you be under surveillance? Joining us first today, Joe Durkin, a spokesman for the Tampa Police Department, and Tom Colatosti, president and CEO of Visage Incorporated, the company that developed the software used in Tampa during Super Bowl week. Joe, if I could start with you, why did the Tampa Police decide to use this technology at the Super Bowl?
Well, we were approached by the company that manufactures this system and asked if we were interested in using it, evaluate it. Frequently, companies with the latest technology available for law enforcement that can assist us in providing the best service to protect our community will approach us. And when this was offered, we accepted it.
And the NFL knew about it? They were part of the decision?
Very much so. We obviously consulted with the NFL, and they were in agreement that we use it. And one of the conditions of using it was no images were retained. So when your picture was scanned, if you didn't match anybody in a database, your picture was not retained.
Did you have any reason to suspect that some sort of incident might take place at the Super Bowl, or were you looking for anyone in particular?
Well, that's a good question. You know, the Super Bowl is probably the most watched athletic event in the nation, if not the world. The eyes of Tampa, the eyes of the world were literally on Tampa. Security was the number one focus there, that we want to ensure that nothing happened here and all of our visitors were well protected and enjoyed their visit to Tampa.
So you were not looking for anyone in particular, or you didn't have any threats of any kind?
No, you're always on alert for any potential that can happen. I mean, that's the focus of law enforcement. Preparation, not paranoia, is what keeps you safe.
Let me bring Tom in here quickly. Tom, how does this technology work?
We take a number of measurements of one's face. We have some very sophisticated algorithms and formulas, so we measure the distance between a person's eyes, the slope of their nose, the angle of their cheekbone, their chin, thickness of their lips, and we take all of those and reduce them to mathematical algorithms.
And then this information goes into some sort of database, and you make comparisons?
Well, we would have the images in the database, and those images would be reduced down to a mathematical formula. And so when the new image comes in, that's also reduced. So we're really comparing two numbers against two numbers. That's how the technology works. It's really not face-to-face. It's number to number. And
where do you get those images?
The images are typically supplied by the customer. So in the case of the Super Bowl, it's supplied by the law enforcement agencies, and so they were put into our database. In other situations, if we're at a casino doing surveillance there, they'd be provided by the owner of the casino in terms of the people that they would be on the lookout for. If we were deployed in an ATM, they'd be the bank customers. So it's all driven by the customer in terms of where those images come from.
So can we assume that for something as large as the Super Bowl, that came from maybe the FBI or the Tampa Police Department, or what?
My understanding is that we had several thousand images that came from a variety of law enforcement agencies.
And Joe, you guys came up with 19 matches, I understand. What sort of people came up?
Correct, we did. We have about 19 matches out of the thousands that came through Raymond James Stadium. The individuals that were identified, they had backgrounds dealing with pickpockets, con artists, that kind of thing.
So what did you do with those people? Did you approach them or did you arrest them?
In that case, no, because the individuals that were identified, they didn't raise the concern of the highest level for us. What it did do, it confirmed our suspicions that there were going to be a multitude of individuals with a background in pickpocketing, con games, attracted to the Tampa area to deal with preying on the visitors here.
What if you turned up somebody that, say, had, you know, I don't know, 50 outstanding parking tickets or something? If a match was, I mean, could a match have come out of that because they had this sort of past outstanding record? And if so, did you sort of keep that information for later?
No, the database was primarily for individuals with a propensity for the crimes inflicted upon a larger crowd, such as the pickpockets, up to and including a possible terrorist. We weren't looking for, and we didn't have anybody in the database with outstanding bad checks or parking tickets. That's not what the focus was.
Okay. So you didn't arrest anybody, though?
Not out of this system, no.
Okay. Tom, now what happens if you look like a known terrorist or a criminal in some way? Can this software make that mistake if you just resemble?
Well, the great thing about the technology is it makes less mistakes than humans. Humans tend to identify people based on height, race, gender, body type, blue coats, things of that nature. To the extent that our technology is based on mathematics, it's simply looking at all of the formulas on a person's face. So it's much more reliable. And so we're very excited about our technology because it will reduce the misinformation and the misidentification of a number of people. And so we think we're adding an awful lot to consumers and to the marketplace that have concern with privacy and bad things happening to them.
Joe, what if you guys had identified a known terrorist? What would you have done then? I mean, do you have to, maybe this known terrorist was just attending the Super Bowl. I mean, do you still have to have probable cause to approach him or arrest him?
Well, in that case, had we had somebody of that magnitude identified, obviously we would have had the cameras kept on him until we would have had officers approach the individual and take it from there. But ideally, that's what the system was for, is a very much a proactive approach to crime fighting.
Let me go to the audience here quickly. Isaac, you had a comment about this. You're sort of bothered by this, I presume.
Well, with the way it's working right now, it's okay because they're not storing anything and they're not cataloging people. But people being people, they foreseeably in the future, they could, whoever had this technology could take it and catalog people and have them in a certain arena. I'm just wondering, are they going to stop it anytime soon? Is it going to go any further, or is it just going to stay at this level?
What do you think the potential for abuse of this technology is, Tom?
Well, we think it's a great improvement over the technology that exists today. If you go into a 7-Eleven or a McDonald's or a bank or a gas station, they have video cameras there, and those are on tape and are being stored. And so our technology is a quantum leap improvement over that because we're taking the image and we're not retaining it, and we're simply using it, bouncing it against the database, and then it gets dropped. So for people that have that concern, we share it. And we think we're making a giant step forward to reduce that concern.
Let me bring in someone else who has concerns about this. Barry Steinhardt is with us. He's Associate Director of the ACLU. Barry, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
What's wrong with this picture in your view?
Well, there's something very chilling about law enforcement videotaping everyone who's coming into the nation's premier sporting event and then checking their identity against a database. But if you look beyond this particular application at the Super Bowl and look to the future, what it tells us is that we are really on the cusp of a surveillance society where you're not going to be able to go anywhere without being subject to both surveillance and identification. And perhaps this application was relatively benign, although I still find it chilling. But the next set of applications will not be so benign. Isaac's question from the audience was exactly the right question. What are we going to do with this information next? The problem we have now is that the technology is developing at light speed, but the law is still in the Stone Ages when it comes to protecting our privacy.
I guess I'm still wondering from Tom about how you protect this technology from being abused. You said it keeps getting better and better, but there isn't a technology out there that can't be abused. So how do you do
well,
that?
you know, that's certainly true. Any technology can be abused. It's just interesting to me hearing the commentary about the concern about it. It seems to me that as we look at the history of technology, that people seem to always resist it. I don't know what it is about the human condition that seems to react against technology. They said this about penicillin. They said it about TVs. They said it about television and the internet. We're on the other side of it. We believe this offers a level of security and convenience that's far beyond what we experience today. And we're very excited about all of the problems that exist today and the abuses that occur. And this technology gives greater freedom and greater privacy to individuals. We wouldn't be doing it for any other reason.
I got to take a quick break here, and as I do, we do have a statement from the Vice President of Public Relations for the National Football League, Greg Aiello, who says video surveillance in public places and at events like the Super Bowl is part of routine law enforcement procedure in order to better protect the public. We'll take a break. What do you think? Is the technology a good way to catch criminals? Is it invasion of privacy? Or both? Take the Talkback Live online viewer vote at cnn.com/talkback. AOL keyword is CNN. And we'll be back right after this.
Weeknights at 11, your best choice for sports news is Sports Tonight. With Fred Hickman and Vince Cellini. It's a fun, fast-paced, and smarter approach to sports news. Together with the insiders at Sports Illustrated, Fred and Vince deliver all the day's sports news and highlights in just a half hour. Join Fred and Vince on Sports Tonight, weeknights at 11 on CNN.
Since it installed surveillance cameras a month ago, the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority says it is catching an average of 600 vehicles a day using the automated fast lane. The city of Boston lost about $4 million last year in unpaid tolls. That was our secret surveillance camera there through the plants. Emails. Patrick in South Carolina says, you voluntarily surrender many personal freedoms when you choose to attend events such as Super Bowls. It's right there in the fine print on the back of your ticket. If this face recognition technology gets even one wanted person behind bars, then that is more important to me than my privacy. Daryl in Oregon, on the other hand, says our privacy and our freedoms are slowly being eroded because some in government and business think it is acceptable to ignore the rights of the many to catch the guilty few. And it is precisely because it is done slowly that there is never sufficient public outrage to stop it. Barry, this is something that we all have to weigh, our privacy and how we feel about that and how comfortable we are with this kind of society that we are headed towards, or our safety and security?
Well, I think we do have to re-examine what a reasonable expectation of privacy is. You know, this technology is very powerful that was being used. For example, the video portion, the video surveillance portion of this operation, at least as it was employed in Ybor City, which was an entertainment district in Tampa, is an entertainment district in Tampa, can see things that the human eye really can't see. And as this technology gets more and more powerful, we have to ask ourselves the question, don't we want to put it under some control? The analogy was suggested earlier, well, people resisted penicillin. I want to talk about that analogy for a minute. You know, penicillin and all drugs are in fact subjected to testing. They're subjected to reasonable regulations that are designed to curb the problems that they may cause as well as to encourage the benefits. This technology is not subject to that kind of regulation. This use may be relatively benign, but I can assure you that the next one won't be, and that what will happen is that incrementally, use of these biometric techniques of identification will simply creep into our society until we get to the point where we'll simply accept them as part of our everyday life, but we'll find ourselves living in a fishbowl.
I've got another email here, and I'll direct it to Tom and Joe. I don't know who this is from. There's no name on it, but it says, who's watching the watchers, particularly who's watching the police? In other words, there might be a trust issue involved for some people.
Well, you know, there are real questions about who's watching the watchers here. We know, for example, that in the United Kingdom, where video surveillance is pervasive, that social scientists have studied it, and one thing they have found is that those video cameras are disproportionately turned on people of color and attractive young women. Attractive young women, not surprisingly, because it's men who operate the cameras.
Joe, Tom?
Well, I'll answer that. I think the police are very closely scrutinized by the courts, and anytime police action is taken, it is very, very closely scrutinized. I don't see this. Go ahead.
Joe, you're going to be getting a request for us for access to public documents. I hope you'll be forthcoming in that request, and you give us the information that we're asking for so that you, in fact, can be closely scrutinized.
Well, welcome to Florida, where public records law here is one of the most open in the nation. The
You do have an open...
That we do, but the Tampa Police Department, when we were offered this system, any and all means that we could employ to ensure the safety of all the visitors to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa were utilized. And I think far and away the majority of people would have applauded our efforts in keeping it as safe as we did.
Let me take a phone call. John on the phone from West Virginia. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can understand with a Super Bowl or a sporting event of that nature. My concern is reducing this technology to a level that can be carried by a patrolman on duty or someone in close proximity of my home who could evade my privacy. What's the potential chance of something like this happening? And if so, what can we do about it?
Tom, let me have you address that first.
Sure. I'm totally confused by the question and also from the comments from the fellow from the ACLU. There's nothing private about one's face. I really am totally confused and don't really get it. My face is seen right now by 1 million people, I would suspect. I walk up and down the street, people see my face. There's no invasion about that. The gentleman who just called with regard to the police, we think that's another wonderful application where if there was a tool in a police car so that the police officer knew when they stopped someone on the road who was in that car, and it would take that police officer out of harm's way. So we just see only beneficial applications to this.
Let me get some people in here from the audience quickly. Mark, go ahead.
Okay with it. I don't see what the problem is.
You're saying if it keeps society safer, most of the audience seems to be okay with that. Erica, or I'm sorry, Jacob.
Yeah.
Be the one.
Yes, I hold some views that are not politically correct because I'm a Christian, and I'm worried that it could be used down the line in persecuted Christians because they don't agree with the laws of the land because they break God's laws. So this could be used in a very detrimental way, and I'm very, very concerned about it. I wonder if anybody else agrees with me.
Jacob.
You know, this kind of technology...
I would just add, as a person who considers themselves a believer and a Christian, and I have very strong beliefs about my faith. But I think some of those concerns are just frankly silly. We had one person resisting a barcode because it was a 2D barcode, and they came up with this crazy notion that D is the 4th letter of the alphabet, and 2 plus 4 is 6, and somehow that was the mark of the beast. And we think that maybe some of those folks might be sincere, but they don't have a good understanding of Scripture.
Well, you know, I'm not prepared to dismiss anybody's religious belief as inconsequential. But the question really poses this issue. Inevitably, this technology is going to be used against people who are most powerless and most despised in society, whether it is people of minority religious views or it's people of color. That's who the technology is going to be used against, particularly as the technology becomes more pervasive.
Let me go to
it would seem to me that if the ACLU is really concerned about privacy, that the fastest growing crime in America today is identity theft. 500,000 people last year were victims of identity theft. I could become you, Barry, before the end of the day because there are absolutely no controls over that. And once I became you, I could open credit cards, get checking accounts, passports. I could do a whole bunch of things. And so in that area, I think there ought to be legislation and ought to be some very proactive approach. That, to me, is what's scary. It isn't scary that someone sees my image. What's frightening to me is that someone becomes me, like happened to Tiger Woods a couple of weeks ago.
Barry, hold that thought for just a minute. I got to go to break here. As we do, cameras at the Super Bowl are not a legitimate form of law enforcement. It is just another excuse to invade the privacy of law-abiding Americans. Jim says unless you're going to steal something, a surveillance system should not bother you. We'll be back.
You'd expect breaking news from CNN Interactive, but how about fashion, travel, entertainment, health and medical news, science breakthroughs, weather, plus links to CNN's great business and sports sites. No wonder PC Magazine calls it the web's most complete news source. CNN Interactive, a whole world of news and information on the World Wide Web. Get it all at CNN.com.
Law enforcement officials in Lawndale, California are fighting vandalism with sound and motion-activated cameras. Would-be graffiti artists are met with a camera flash and a recording that says, "Greetings from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. If you are a vandal, we have just taken your picture, and we will be prosecuting you. So have a nice day." Let me do a statement that it's from Congressman Edward Markey, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, who is co-chairman of the Congressional Privacy Caucus. He says, "I find it appalling that football fans who attended this year's Super Bowl were secretly videotaped as they entered the stadium. Public safety and law enforcement must be respected, but so must our privacy as Americans. Shouldn't we be able to watch the big game without being watched by Big Brother? Is it right for innocent football fans to be treated like potential criminals? That is not the kind of world I think Americans want to live in, and I think that we need to carefully consider the consequences that increased use of video surveillance has on the public's right to privacy." Tom, you think this is an issue that Congress might get involved in?
Well, I can't speak to what Congress might get involved in. I'm from Massachusetts, and so they get involved in a lot of things. I'm just totally confused. I'm totally surprised that people would be so concerned. I go through Disney World, and I could end up on 100 cameras of people taking my picture inadvertently. Where is Big Brother or the privacy that my image is being taken? I'm totally confused by the question.
This is not simply a matter of the image being taken. This is an image that's being taken for the purpose of identification. It creates the possibility that there's nowhere we're going to be able to go where we can remain anonymous. Not only will our image be taken, but we'll be identified. And as the technology grows more powerful, our identity will be cross-referenced with other databases, and other information about us will be used for all sorts of purposes, both by law enforcement and by private industry, for example, for marketing purposes. That's the problem. The problem is the combination of these technologies that is creating this surveillance society.
Bobby, let me add here. What we've done here is we've used today's technology to make our job that much more efficient. Would it be okay if we could gather enough manpower that we had enough detectives sitting at all the gates with all the individuals in our database that we were looking for? If our detectives were sitting there looking at the picture and watching the crowds that come through, what we've done in essence is we've automated that process.
I think it is, I think from a law enforcement point of view, I think it's very easy to understand why you guys would be in favor of this. It certainly does help make your job a lot easier. Let me take, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In addition, there was no secret videotaping going on. Clearly the cameras were in plain view, as well as there was posted throughout the exterior of Raymond James stadiums, warning that there was video surveillance, that you may be on closed-circuit television. The NFL agreed to this with that position being taken, that clearly the warnings were there and that the pictures were not being retained. And really it comes down to, it's not what Tampa police or law enforcement in general believes about the privacy issue. What has the courts ruled? And clearly the courts have ruled there is no expectation of privacy in such a public setting.
Is that right, Barry?
Well, I think that is probably right, but I think the courts are going to begin to have to re-examine those questions in light of new technologies. There's a case right now before the United States Supreme Court involving the use of thermal imaging, which allows law enforcement to capture information from inside a house. And I think the courts are going to have to seriously look at the question of where do we have a reasonable expectation of privacy when technology is being developed that gives law enforcement powers that simply weren't available 10 or 15 years ago, and go far beyond anything that normal human senses can access.
Let me go to this whole...
It seems to me that the technology, in fact, turns the clock back. Today, if you went into the Super Bowl, you're being observed by undercover agents who you would have great risk that they're going to profile you or take some other very subjective features about
Not all
your
100,000 people
behavior.
going into the Super Bowl.
They're all being watched, of course. So law enforcement is very concerned about suspicious behavior. This at least reduces it to an objective level and eliminates profiles. I'm surprised you're not supportive.
I gotta take a break here, and I gotta say goodbye to Joe Durkin. Thank you for joining us, and Tom Colatosti, thank you for joining us. I want to go to this entire back row from the UK when we come back to talk to them, because there's a lot of that going on in England as well. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Joining us now is Pamela Hayes, a criminal defense attorney and former New York prosecutor. Pamela, good to see you.
Good to be here.
I'm curious. You're okay with this? Why?
I'm okay with it because I don't think it's intrusive. It wasn't a search. They were only focusing on people who had outstanding warrants. It wasn't intrusive to the degree that a person who was just at a game, they didn't focus on them. So they hadn't done anything wrong in my mind. I couldn't say it was an impermissible search. It was in the public arena, and I don't have a problem with it. I would much rather sacrifice that motive of privacy for them to find somebody who is a potential terrorist or somebody who's out on the lam that they're trying to get.
What if one of your clients was busted through this technology? Would you be against the technology as part of the defense, maybe?
I'm not against the technology as part of a defense because it's not a search. If it's not a search, then I don't have a legal basis for objecting. I might not like that my client got busted, but I have to have a legal basis for putting forth good arguments to the court. And in this instance, they haven't done anything wrong. It's the same as being captured on local TV news and going from there.
Joe has a legal question. Go ahead.
I was asking him if the guidelines for this videotapes fall under the same as guidelines for voice tapes in a court of law. You know, otherwise they have to have either a judge's permission or the person's permission in order to make a tape, you know, admissible in court. Does that fall under do videotapes fall under the same guidelines?
No, not at all. There are two different things happening here. What they had was a videotape in a public arena. They wasn't taking anything from the public. This doing a reflection of their picture. And for that reason, I don't think it's a search. When you have an issue about a video camera and you need somebody's permission, what you're doing is seizing the conversation. And an illegal search and an illegal seizure is impermissible against the Fourth Amendment. And that's where you get your problem at.
Barry?
So they're two different things, in my opinion.
Well, I agree that the answer to that is no, but I don't think that that's ought to be the right answer. You know, until very recently, the Supreme Court said that wiretapping a conversation wasn't a form of search. It wasn't until 1968 that they ruled to the contrary on that. We need to examine the question, re-examine the question of what's a search. I think that for police to be training a video camera on 100,000 people entering a stadium and comparing that against a database for the purpose of identification clearly is a search, according to any common sense standard. And the question then is the law going to catch up with the technology here? Unfortunately, to date, it hasn't.
But the problem here is that all searches are not bad. They're only problematic when they're unreasonable. And unless you could argue that this small picture was an unreasonable search or seizure, you're not going to have a good argument.
Tom on the phone from Missouri has been hanging on for a while. Tom, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Your question or comment?
The earlier in the show, they stated that all the images were going to be dropped. How do we trust them to say that they're going to be dropped? What proof do we have? They can keep these records forever.
That's
well,
a good question.
we intend to try to find out. We intend to use the open access laws, the access to documents laws in Florida, their sunshine laws, to try to get a handle on exactly what happened here. We also intend to call on Florida officials to hold hearings on this. We shouldn't say in this situation that we just trust them. Our Constitution isn't based on a theory of trust the government. It's, as President Reagan used to say, trust but verify. We need to know, in fact, that these images were destroyed and that this operation was as limited as they claim that it was.
I got a bunch of guys up here from the UK in this back row. Andrew, you guys have several areas of law enforcement or security in England, right, where you use this kind of surveillance?
Yeah, most of our city centres and towns are under constant video surveillance. We don't see it as a threat. It keeps crime off our streets. It's not really an issue. You don't really notice it, but it's been proven also that the crime rate is far reduced wherever this is known to be in place. So I'm interested in the way in which it's been portrayed. It's a very one-sided way, and it's very unfortunate that those things happen. But I don't see it as an issue, and I'm sure all my colleagues wouldn't either.
So there, Barry, it seems that most people in our audience today are okay with this.
Well, I wouldn't be able to judge that based on a few comments, but you know, I'm actually familiar with the social science literature from the United Kingdom, and in fact, it doesn't reduce crime. It certainly has what it has is what's known as a displacement effect. It moves crime from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. And the other thing that we know about the video surveillance in the United Kingdom is that it is used in a racially discriminatory way, just as it will be used in a racially discriminatory way in the United States as it becomes more pervasive. So the facts actually in the United Kingdom don't bear out that impression.
You know, I'm really concerned because I need to know which way this was used in a racially discriminatory fashion at the Super Bowl, because my understanding was the camera flashed on everybody.
Well, I wasn't talking about the Super Bowl here.
Oh,
The question was, how is it used in the United Kingdom, where it is much more pervasive than it is here? It's used on the streets, basically, in the United Kingdom, and we know that it's used in a racially discriminatory way. And I think as it moves from out beyond a few high-profile events like the Super Bowl to the streets, that you will find that it's used in a racially discriminatory way.
Got to take a break here. Phyllis in California says if there had been a terrorist incident, the police didn't use this technology, everybody would be screaming bloody murder about why they didn't prevent it. Brandon in Indiana says we need this technology in Washington in the offices of our elected leaders. This would make our laws change. We'll be back right after this. Let me go to Ivy on the phone from California. Ivy, go ahead.
Yes, Bobby. I cannot believe how people are opposed to these surveillance cameras. I would feel extremely safe. After all, if this is the way they have to catch these rotten apples, so be it. I think there should be surveillance cameras everywhere.
All right, Shelley, your thoughts?
I'm in favor of this because it's going to protect me. But unfortunately, I don't think we live in the perfect world, so I'm afraid of when this technology falls into the wrong hands. Where do we go then? How do we stop it?
I'm still curious about the Super Bowl. Pam, if someone had been pulled aside at the Super Bowl, for example, because their face came up as a match for someone, and someone said to them, can you please show us your ID, your license or something? Would you have to show it, or can you say no? You know, what have I done wrong?
I think you could say no. Nobody said you have to comply. You always have the right to refuse. In most instances, you do it at your peril. But you always have the right to say no.
All right. Up to the audience and Angela.
Okay. The majority of this discussion is centered on the law enforcement use of this technology, and I think most people would agree with the application and the example of the Super Bowl. usage. But intent is also another factor in this equation, and I don't see the protection or the legal environment laws that would be a protection for unscrupulous uses of this technology, the processes, and the information or databases that it would generate.
And a couple of emails we have. Every time I hear someone in authority say, "Trust me," the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I'm so tired of people crying about their rights. Honest people have nothing to hide. I'm not getting any names on these emails, by the way, so I'm not sure who they're coming from. To the audience here, quickly. Can our guest still hear now? We had a little audio problems there.
I can hear now,
You
yes.
can hear now?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe? Oh, I don't remember what you said. Okay. Barry, what is your greatest fear here about where we are heading? I mean, within realistic parameters, where do you think we'll be?
Oh, I think this technology is likely to become pervasive and to be used in an unsupervised, unregulated way so that both law enforcement and the private sector are going to be able to identify us in situations where we otherwise would assume that we are anonymous, so that you're just walking down the street, minding your own business, living your daily life, and all of a sudden you find out that you're subject to identification. That may have consequences, for example, if you're someone that law enforcement profiles as someone that they want to talk to, even though you're not committing any crime, or it may have consequences if private industry figures out who you are and they begin to deluge you with advertisements or come-ons for purchases of services or goods. Those are the kind of thing that we're moving towards unless we begin to get some handle on this technology now. You know, I'm not in favor of a Luddite approach of let's just smash the technology here. We can't put this genie back in the bottle, but we can create the kind of common sense privacy rules that allow for the control of this technology in the same way we have common sense rules about prescription drugs like penicillin.
And let me go to Dick. You had a question for Barry.
I had a question for Barry. Suppose your car up in the parking lot here is being trashed by someone and they catch the person on the surveillance camera, and then they are able to match it up with a database and able to catch the person. Would you be in favor of it then?
Well, you're talking about two very different situations. What happened at the Super Bowl and what's increasingly happening on the streets is that innocent people are being targeted for surveillance, simply walking down the street or entering a public facility like the stadium in Tampa. That's very different from a general pan of an open parking lot. I don't think my car has any expectation of privacy, but here you're talking about a systematic form of surveillance, and we need to begin to ask questions about how that operates and what happens to that information and how the targets are selected.
I got to take another break. We'll be back in just a moment.
President Gerald Ford, Jay Leno, President Bill Clinton, Mike Wallace, President George Bush, Jerry Seinfeld, Michael Jordan, Tom Cruise, George Clooney, Queen Noor, Tom Hanks, Dan Rather, Hillary Clinton, Celine Dion, Bette Midler.
No wonder he's #1 in primetime talk. Great guests, great talk.
President Jimmy Carter, Barbara Walters,
Larry King Live. Weeknights on CNN.
Founded in 1996, the Security Camera Players protest New York's thousands of surveillance cameras with guerrilla theater. Their performances have included quick versions of 1984 and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We have another congressional reaction to this. Representative Joe Barton, who's a Republican from Texas, is co-chair of the Congressional Privacy Caucus. He says, I am one of the strongest congressional proponents of protecting the right to privacy of every American. I am, however, cognizant of the need for legitimate law enforcement agencies to use existing technology to protect the public in situations where it is reasonable to expect a security breach or a terrorist act. I do believe, however, these agencies should be held accountable to using proper judicial restraint and for obtaining the appropriate warrants to narrow the purpose of any such search operation. To the audience here, we got a bunch of folks. Mark, Eddie?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what Barry or the ACLU's position would be today if, in fact, this would have led to an arrest and the prevention of a possible terrorist attack.
Well, of course it didn't. And, you know, we have to be very careful here about law enforcement waving the bloody flag of terrorism all the time. That, for example, is what has justified an enormous increase in the use of electronic surveillance, wiretapping. But we know from that instance where the government is actually required to submit reports every year about how they use it, that it is almost never used for any investigation of any crime that could ever be related to terrorism or, generally speaking, even violence. We've got to be real careful. It's important to remember that 100,000 people were surveilled here, and they got 19 hits, they say, none of which resulted in an arrest. Let's be careful about these red flags being waved around to justify invasions of our privacy and our rights.
Bobby, the only issue that I take with Barry is I don't think it's a red flag to think that there could be security breaches when you have that number of people in a crowded area like a Super Bowl. If you want to have hearings to see what they did with the rest of the film, I think that's fine. But I don't think you should tie law enforcement's hands when they're trying to do a legitimate job.
I'm going to let that be the last word today. We'll take a quick look at the poll before we go here. The question was, surveillance systems in public places are a violation of privacy, 32%. A good way to catch criminals, 40%. Both, 28%. Barry Steinhardt, Pamela Hayes, thank you both very much for joining us.
Good to be here.
And thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you again tomorrow at 3 for more Talkback.